Have you ever found yourself totally worried about something you know is incredibly unlikely? Like a shark attack when you're at the beach, or a plane crash. Well, it turns out that's not just you being weird. It's actually a fundamental feature of how our minds are wired. So let's dive into this fascinating and, often flawed way our brains handle risk.
So that's a quote from Daniel Kahneman, a Nobel laureate and one of the most influential psychologists of our time. And get this, it's not from some formal academic paper. It's from a moment where he caught his own brain making a classic mistake, a mistake that reveals this huge blind spot in how we all think.
And this is the central puzzle we're going to try and unravel today. Why is it that we can know something is safe but still feel scared? Why does our gut reaction so often just steamroll the cold, hard statistics? The answer, it turns out, lies in this constant battle between two different ways our brain thinks. So Kahneman tells this personal story about his time in Israel during a really tense period of bus bombings. Now, even though he's a world-class expert on risk, he found himself doing something kind of irrational. He would actively avoid stopping his car next to buses at red lights. He was being driven by this anxious feeling, not by the facts.
Okay, so let's look at the actual numbers. Over a 3-year span, there were, tragically, 236 deaths from these attacks. And that number, it definitely feels significant. It feels scary. But to really understand the risk, you need context.
And here is that context. At the time, there were 1.3 million people riding the bus in Israel every single day. When you actually do the math, the statistical risk to any one person was just minuscule. So what was really going on inside Kahneman's head?
And this is where you see the two parts of the brain just clashing. His logical, analytical brain, what Kahneman calls System 2, knew the risk was basically zero. But his fast, intuitive brain, System 1, was reacting to the powerful, horrible image of a bomb. He wasn't acting to increase his safety, he was acting to get rid of that awful feeling in the pit of his stomach.
This whole phenomenon actually has a name. It's called an availability cascade. And it's this self-reinforcing cycle where a pretty rare event grabs our attention, then it gets amplified by the media and social chatter, and it ends up feeling way, way more common than it actually is.
This is exactly why terrorism is so psychologically effective. It's designed to hijack our brains. It's not really about the statistical damage. It's about creating this vivid, easy-to-recall image of fear that our automatic, gut-feeling System 1 just can't ignore, no matter how much our logical System 2 tries to reason with it.
And this brings us to a really crucial idea. For our brains, images just trump numbers. The more vivid and rich a mental image is, the less we seem to care about the actual probability. Our brain gets so wrapped up in the picture of what could happen that the odds, they kind of become irrelevant.
Okay, so check this out. You've got two options here. They describe the same exact potential reward. But researchers found that just by adding a small, vivid, and totally irrelevant detail, like a large blue cardboard envelope, it makes us care less about the odds. Our intuitive brain gets so fixated on that specific mental picture that it gives less weight to the abstract number of the probability.
And this leads us to another weird quirk of our minds called denominator neglect. It's our brain's strange tendency to focus on the number of times something happens while totally ignoring the bigger picture, the context.
So in simple terms, we see the number of people who win the lottery. That's the numerator, and we get excited. But we conveniently forget about the millions upon millions who bought tickets and lost. That's the denominator. Our attention is just naturally drawn to the vivid instances of winning, not the vast, invisible pool of not winning. Look at these two statements. They describe the exact same risk, but they feel completely different, don't they? The percentage is abstract. It feels tiny, almost meaningless. But that second phrase, 1 of 100,000, forces you to picture a single, specific child being harmed. And that vivid image makes the risk feel so much bigger, so much scarier. All right, now it's your turn. Let's see this in action. Imagine you're in an experiment, and you have to choose between two big urns. Your goal is to draw a red marble. If you do, you win a prize. So which one do you pick?
Here are your options. Urn A has 1 red marble out of 10 total marbles. That gives you a 10% chance of winning. Urn B has 8 red marbles, but it's out of 100 total marbles, so that's an 8% chance. The logical choice, the smart bet, is clearly Urn A. It gives you better odds.
And yet, get this, a shocking number of people, sometimes up to 40% in these studies, choose Urn B. This is denominator neglect, live and in action.
Their intuitive brain is just captivated by that more hopeful, vivid image of 8 winning marbles, and it completely ignores the fact that there are 92 losing marbles in that same urn.
Okay, so this isn't just some weird lab experiment, right? These biases are everywhere. They show up in how we follow sports and even in how experts make life and death decisions. So there was this one study where basketball fans were asked to estimate the probability of each of the 8 playoff teams winning the championship. When you added up all their estimates, it came out to a whopping 240%, which is, impossible. Why? Because when they focused on each team one by one, their mind created this plausible story for how that team could win, which made them overestimate its chances and neglect all the others.
And the consequences of this can be really, really serious. In another study, mental health professionals were given a patient's risk profile, and they were almost twice as likely to deny him discharge when the risk was framed as that concrete frequency, 10 out of 100, because that format created a much more vivid and frankly scary mental image of violent acts.
So let's just boil this all down into a simple 3-step process. First, if a vivid, rare event grabs our attention, we totally overestimate how likely it is. Second, we then overweight that inflated probability when we make decisions. But here's the twist. If a rare event isn't vivid, if it doesn't grab our attention, we do the exact opposite. We neglect it completely, basically treating its probability as 0.
And all this leaves us with a pretty heavy final thought from Kahneman. Our brains, you see, they evolved to handle immediate, common threats, not these weird, abstract, rare probabilities. And in a world where we now face really complex, unprecedented challenges, things like climate change or new pandemics, this cognitive flaw is not great news. It's something we have to be aware of and actively fight against. So it makes you wonder, what rare risk out there might you be getting completely wrong?